Welcome back to the VHS Club. I am Katie. This is Nat, and we are here to talk about 90s movies that you probably have already seen. Have you seen Blade? We have. We just rewatched it.
Yes.
We're excited to be talking about it tonight. And we threw one over on you because we promised you we would talk about True Lies, but we really want our friend Chris to be on for that one. So we're bumping it. We're bumping it until Wednesday just to really make Paul crazy. Paul and Kimberly hang out in our live studio audience, but hopefully they'll forgive us. So tonight, we're talking about Blade, 1998 Blade. Nat, what were your initial thoughts of Blade?
I remember when I first watched it thinking, okay, it's entertaining. Rewatching it now, I probably enjoyed more of it than I did when it first came out.
Oh,
if that makes sense.
We were talking before we jumped on live, as we always do, and I was saying that I feel like I finally entered the age where, like, I remember my parents saying this when I was a kid, where they're like, have we seen this before? And they're like, whatever, we'll rewatch it again. It'll be like the first time. That's kind of where I am these days, where I know I saw Blade. I know I saw it. I know I saw like all of the Blades, because there are 3 so far, plus television shows.
Well, yeah, and Ryan Reynolds and Blade 3.
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds is in Blade 3. And so I know I had seen it, but I definitely like felt like I was watching it the first time. There were like clips of it where I was kind of like, oh yeah, sort of remember this. So it was a first time experience for me.
I think with the opening scene, it opens into sort of an underground rave, which is just a rave for people who lived in the 90s.
Yeah.
Raves were underground. It wasn't in organized buy a ticket kind of places like it is, I think, the children do now, or did for a while. I'm like, no, you had to, anyways, Google the history of raves. But what I liked about that opening scene, I actually thought it was really brilliant, because you have like the flashing lights, the pulsating music pounding, like, and it creates a sort of surrealism. And if you haven't walked through a rave with all the little laser lights and stuff, or a club, it does it does give you where everything kind of happens in flashes, and people moving is like super fast but slow mode. And I thought it was really cool, because this vampire, she's bringing in a human as a snack, I'm assuming, for all the other vampires at this vampire rave. And there's no way for him to know that these vampires are moving faster or stronger or are different, because of that whole surrealism that a rave or a club kind of gives you. Anyways, I thought it was actually quite clever. I really enjoyed how they did that.
It was a great opening scene, and I do think that it like very much set the tone. Like, again, I did not remember most of this movie rewatching it, but I did have this like when this scene clipped, I was just like, this is why I didn't ever want to go to raves as a teenager. Like, I feel like watching these movies, I was like, vampires exist at raves, because every single like one of these post-apocalyptic movies, like even Matrix, one of the Matrix movies has like this
Reloaded,
crazy rave scene. Yeah, so there's like, it feels like a dangerous place, and not just from like potential drug overdoses or kidnapping, like I would be afraid of now, but just like the vampires of it all. Like the vampires of it all made me feel as though anything was possible at a rave. Like,
it was pretty cool that the rave went like full Carrie, where they just drench everybody in blood. Yeah. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
and I was thinking back then, they did throw stuff on, like, and there was we used to call them like bubble raves, where they would just shoot bubbles into the audience, like into the dancers, and you're covered. And like God knows what you were covered in by the time you left a rave. Like, it was, you're sticky, it was gross, it was like, I'm like, if blood came down from the ceiling, we probably would have lost our shit and thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like, would not
Yeah.
have triggered red flags for me at the time. But
Something in the back of my mind, I'm like, it would have triggered red flags for me. I would have been like, no, I'm good. But I will say it was definitely a moment in rewatching this, like the second that
yeah,
it's very obvious then that these are vampires. It's very obvious that, like, there's blood coming out. It was the moment where the blood started coming out of the like sprinkler system at this
yeah.
rave that I immediately like paused because I'm obnoxious, and I had to like look at my phone and look up the year of this movie compared to The Matrix. And the reason why, I was just sort of like in this moment of, where does this movie lie in the world of special effects and CGI and what's possible in pulling off a movie? Because the blood looked like red paint or red corn syrup. Like, it didn't look as awesome
Yeah, like
as
Carrie.
certainly like Carrie.
Yeah,
But I had like a moment
wasn't
of just being
realistic.
like, how old is this? And so, first fun fact of the evening, friends, if you're keeping track. So this movie, 1998, it is a year before the first Matrix came out. It is certainly at a point where CGI and computer effects and special effects and all of that was like in its
Super
infancy.
new.
And
Yeah.
so much so that in the last scene of this movie, which we will work our way towards in the plot, but the last scene in this movie has Steven Dorff, who Natalie does not think can act anymore, but has him
But
like
can he? You know,
hang
I
on, has him supposed to in like the
don't.
original test studio like version that went out in front of test audiences. He apparently turns into a tornado of blood, like in like one of the final moments. And I guess
That
it
would
was
have been amazing.
yeah, right. If you have a clip of this or can find one, please send it to us.
Oh man.
But apparently it was so bad because of just how difficult and expensive all of that was to pull off at the time that they
Yeah.
had to cut it. Like, it was just awful from that point. So if you're looking for a movie that has like really badass, incredible special effects, this is not that movie. This is like suspension of belief. They're not only in
No.
the fact that there are vampires, but in the fact that like things explode and there's like crazy things that happen where you're like, no, that doesn't, like, that's my friends making movies in their basement level quality. That's the special effects quality that we're looking at in this one. It was
Yeah.
Paul, who was hanging out with us in our live studio audience. Hey Paul, and I see Luis here as well. Paul says it was a cheap rave, so they had to water down the blood. They really
I
had to
mean,
make
it
an effort
looked
there.
pretty. Yeah, it was definitely like corn syrup and food dye. It was
Yeah,
something.
yeah, definitely had that
I
vibe.
so in Stephen Dorff's opening scene, I was like, oh. I remember him being like some like a thespian, like an actor, but
No.
then he did progress. I don't know if he got better throughout the plot of the film or if it just was that I got used to him again. I and I'm trying to think. I'm like, we loved him in the Beatles movie. It wasn't actually a Beatles movie, but about the Beatles called Backbeat.
Oh
But he
yeah,
also
yeah,
didn't really have any dialogue. If you think about it,
yeah.
Stu of the Beatles, he was a Beatle-ish. Um,
We promise.
I mean, along with not playing the bass, didn't really talk a lot, but
Yeah. I kept recasting him in my mind throughout this movie, if I'm being honest with you. Like, I was super
he
excited to see him again,
definitely,
and throughout I was like,
yeah,
I bet you like I was just going through like all the actors that like kind of look like him that could have played him
yeah.
better, and I couldn't really find a good replacement, but I'm with you. Like, he came across more as like a slightly emo, whiny rich kid, like, who was playing at
Oh,
being a
you're saying
villain versus like a super villain. Like,
so,
he's not scary. Like,
yeah, I
he's
mean, that's
not.
the character. The character
Yeah.
is basically like, so in the movie Blade, which is a Marvel movie for anybody who wants to know that, wants to
Mm-hmm.
geek out on that.
Yep.
So in this Marvel verse, there are naturally occurring vampires, like you're
Mm-hmm.
born a vampire, or there's the bitten, where you are turned into a vampire.
Yep.
So Stephen Dorff, Frost, is turned into a vampire. He
Yep.
seems to have worked his way high enough
Up
up
the
in
corporate
whatever
ladder.
city.
Yeah.
Yeah, Basically, so whatever city they're in, like he basically is doing a bunch of stuff like having these underground raves and these clubs and whatever, that are upsetting the natural vampires who seem to have this sort of like syndicate or committee from around the world that sort of control the dialogue about vampires and it not getting out, and slash them being like ruling the politicians and owning the police. And anyway, so
Yeah.
we see that this they've clearly been this syndicate for a very long time. And Steven Dorff is basically like this little like kid who's just like, I want to play grown up, stamps his feet, and like this is where we're at. That's the plot of the movie.
Well, and then we also have to talk about Blade.
Well,
So
and Blade,
Blade.
that's Frost's plot of the movie.
That is the Frost plot of the movie. And I will say a
Yeah,
couple of things. One, fun fact. this was Marvel's first real successful movie. So the only other movie that they had
yeah,
really done prior to this was Howard the Duck, which I have to
which
admit
was
I kind of
actually
like.
pretty good.
And
Yeah,
also we should rewatch that one. And but kind of amazing if you think about it. Like I know 1998 both feels like an eternity ago and also like not any time whatsoever. But if you think about where we are right now in the world of Marvel, where it's like, the next
yeah,
15 years of our lives are planned out and there's like 5 billion Marvel movies, like, to be clear, there would not have been any of the other Marvel movies, certainly not as many as there are now, had it not been the success of this franchise.
success of
So
Blade. Yeah,
it is kind of
it's
important to
true.
note. And then the second thing I wanted to say is that, like, Deacon Frost, kind of a badass name. I got to say, like, he really played
It's a
that
pretty good
character
name.
terrible, but it is a good, like, super villain name. I was into the name. I like,
It's funny. I like how before you were saying like you would recast
yeah, I
Steven
wanted
Dorff
to
as
recast
Deacon
him.
Frost, but
Yeah.
you're thinking from today's
I know I
like
am. I am. That's
mind,
true.
because if you think about it, the scene where he has his shirt off and he's like looking all heroin chic, I'm like, you can't get more 90s than like heroin chic Steven Dorff. Like he's not buff, he's not ripped, like that's Wesley Snipes' job as Blade, like.
Yeah.
But this guy, he was like so hot in that very 90s way that
Yeah.
nowadays we're like, you need a
Well, no, I was kind
hospital.
of like, I was sort of thinking about other, like, I was like, what about Skeet Ulrich? I like, and was like, even like, what about
Same
Christian
thing.
Slater? Christian Slater would have also been able to play
Mm,
this really well. Like, I
yeah.
just, I just felt like there were other actors who were like equally like skinny and could play like whiny but powerful. Like, I don't know. I felt like there was,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I would say the other actors in this movie are, and I mean, even Steven Dorff did a
Oh,
good job
what's
for
his
this quality
I
of movie.
love
But Chris
I love
Christopherson, is that who you're saying?
Oh no, that he was
Oh,
great.
he was great.
Great musician.
Yeah.
Um I also love Donald, what's his name? Donald Longu, the
Oh,
Irish guy.
yes. Yeah.
He's like he plays the Irish guy and everything.
I'm not gonna
He
try
was
to
in Law
guess
and
at his
Order.
name,
He
but
was in
yeah.
I know his first
Yeah.
name's Donald. I can't remember his last name. Something with an L. He was great. I loved him
Yeah.
in this. Yeah. No, it was
Yeah.
interesting. It was good. It was actually a good cast. Like it was well cast. People were good in it. It was just that opening scene with Frost where I was like, oh, like, right. All right. Maybe, like, and I don't know. I have to rewatch some of Steven Dorff's stuff. I'm not sure. Is he a good actor or not?
Yeah,
I have no
we'll have
idea.
to check out some of his
He
other
was hot at
movies.
the time. He was popular at the
He
time.
was hot
So,
at the time. I think yeah, like you said, I think it took me a good 20 minutes or so of watching this movie to kind of reset my
yeah.
mind, to be like, oh right, this is like this is, I think, one of the first, like, act traditional like 90s action movies that we watched. It's a
Yeah.
superhero movie.
Yes.
Like, if you're thinking about it in comparison, for example, to
Kind of an
like
anti superhero movie.
it is an
Just,
anti-superhero
yeah.
movie, but it's kind of in the same vein as like the campiness of the OG 90s Batman movies, right? Where it's like there's you kind of have to reset your mindset. It's like it's not
Yeah.
professionally done. There's a comedic aspect to it. Like, even Steven Dorff's like sidekick throughout the movie, who's like completely inept and gets like his
Yeah.
hands cut off and is like
It's
lit on
funny.
fire and somehow survives and like is ridiculous. Like, there is the kind of that aspect to 90s action movies, and particularly even this genre of kind of first round superhero movies, where it it almost makes fun of kind of the excessiveness of the genre. So like even Wesley Snipes, who is like, you know, this like completely ridiculous character, like, so if we talk about him for a bit, like he's gigantic. Paul is
Yeah.
joking about the fact that like he like explodes and stabs and blows up and like destroys all these vampires in seconds. He doesn't get anything on him except for sweat. Like he's completely indestructible. Like he is just like the kind of the counterbalance to everything that Stephen Dorff's character is.
Yeah.
Like he's strong and powerful. He's vampire-ish, but not entirely a vampire. He's born of a turned vampire mother, so he has like
Yes.
characteristics of vampire, but not all of them. And he's fighting it, and he's fighting them, and he's kind of this
Yeah.
foil to them. But
So
I
he
liked
has
his
he
character
has
a lot. Like I think
oh
he did
yeah.
a really like he's campy and ridiculous, but he played it well. And I also just love that the woman who's in it, you know, and this is like a trope throughout all of these 90s action movies where
She's
there's like,
crazy.
yeah, there's always some like way
She
better like smoking hot woman who's like able
yeah.
to pull it off. And I love in this one, like the woman is a hematologist, right? So like
Yeah.
she's like
She's
completely capable. She's a doctor. She herself has been like bitten. So she's on the verge throughout the movie of turning into a vampire. And she keeps saying like, I would like to help you. And both Blade and his like
yeah.
old guy sidekick that's trying to like help him get through it, they're like, nah, we're good. Like we'll just use you as bait. We'll like, you know, convince you to leave and then beg you to come back. And like they don't ever really like, here is like the perfect person that they need to help them, and they're just like,
Yeah.
but you're a lady.
So Blade is a sort of he's a human vampire mutant. He's a mutant.
Yeah.
And
He could
he
be an
takes a
X-Men.
serum.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Marvel.
Yeah.
So he takes a serum to control his vampiric urges to keep him more human. So, but he has sort of the superhuman strength. He ages like a human. He does have bloodlust,
Yep.
and his injuries heal quickly. So the serum basically helps damper his bloodlust. So when they meet this hematologist, she's like, well, I'm just going to find a cure because I got bitten. Like, no, I will find the genetic makeup of this.
She's like, I'm going to solve this. Yeah.
Yeah. And she does. She finds a cure for bitten vampires, which he's not. So it wouldn't work for him.
Yeah.
But like within like the span of what, like 2 days, she's like, solved it.
I know. Whereas Chris Christopherson's character, who's like this grumpy old guy whose family has been eaten and killed by
slaughtered
vampires, by vampires. He just totally tells her within like seconds of realizing that she's probably going to turn anyway. He's just like, grab a gun and end your life. Like that's like he's just like, don't let this happen to you. And whereas she's like, no, I'm gonna solve it for me and everyone. And he's like, all right, fine, if that's what you want to do. Like it.
But even she has quite a bloodlust regardless. So like she wakes up. So she gets bitten and Blade takes her. He rescues her. So that he can give her the serum so that way maybe she won't turn.
Yeah.
So he tries to save her. She wakes up in this strange place, in this like industrial like warehouse.
Yeah.
She sees all of these weapons and she's just totally chill. She's just checking it out, totally emotionless, not freaking out.
No.
You know, like she was thrown off a building a few hours ago. She's been kidnapped. She, you know, she's bloody, and then she wakes up in a room full of weapons and she's just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite movies.
Not an appropriate reaction.
It's one of my favorite movie scenes, probably of all time. Actually, like there's a scene in the hospital where she's still like just working as a doctor. You know, a corpse, what she thinks is a corpse, comes in. He's like burned beyond all recognition. It's clearly a vampire, and then everything goes horribly. Vampire. Yeah, everything goes horribly wrong, right? And so like there's like an attack, and Blade comes out of nowhere to save her. And there's a scene right before, right, like as he's saving her, where he throws her tiny body like off a building onto another like next door building, And
No,
like
like
there's just like
into another city street block.
yeah,
Like he
there's
throws her like a block or two away from the hospital.
there's like a
Like
tarp
what?
on top of that building with presumably like cardboard boxes and stuff underneath
Yeah.
it. And she like bounces off that and flies. And like she's just fine. She's like, oh, I may have dislocated my shoulder. And he's like, gotcha. And like pops her shoulder back in. And I'm like, how is she not dead? Like she's like
It's also
half my
later
size.
later in the movie, Frost meets Blade in a public place, and he's holding this tiny little girl hostage, like maybe
Mm-hmm.
7, like
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Yeah.
And to get away from her, he tosses this child
Yeah.
into a food cart.
Yep.
The food cart, she hits the food cart so hard it like explodes,
Yeah.
and she rolls onto the street. Blade saves her, and then she just gets up and he's like, go home. And she walks away.
Yeah.
This tiny human's body hitting the cart like that would no, that's not how, that's not, it's so unrealistic.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. It's a suspension of belief happening
Yeah.
here.
I
Uh,
do love there's a couple of 90s movie tropes
okay. Hit
in
me with
this that
them.
I love, which were, I mean, this is where they come from. It's this and
Yes.
other 90s action movies.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so the slow-mo put your sunglasses on. You
Oh
know when the
yeah. Or the
action
hump my
hero
hair.
slow-mo puts his
Mm-hmm.
sunglasses on, everybody's dead.
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna die.
The
And I love
sunglasses
it.
in general are great because at one point
Yeah.
at the end of the movie where he's like, Blade is, beyond himself and he's, he's down and out and things are going really bad. One of the comic relief bad guy has stolen his sunglasses and is like wearing them around. And of
Yeah.
course, inevitably Blade makes this giant comeback and kills the bad guy and takes his
Yeah.
sunglasses back and puts them back on. And now we know it's gonna
Everyone's
get
dead.
real. Everyone is
Yeah,
gonna
yeah, yeah.
die. Yeah. It's a great
Even
use of
Blade,
sunglasses.
like, even in his opening scene, he comes into this rave and he like he just kills all the vampires
Yeah.
and saves the one human that happened to be in there. Um he's killing everybody. He has all these weapons, all these like special fancies, very Batman-y, like
Yeah.
has all
It
his
is. It's
gadgets
a
and
dark hero. Yep.
his weapons and um yeah, and then at the end, like when he runs out of bullets, he pulls out his sword, his samurai sword, and I'm like, well, now everybody dies. Like, and I'm like, also, why didn't you just start with that? Like, you clearly didn't need any of the other weapons. Also, I don't know if it was just a 90s thing, because I don't think it was mentioned in the movie, because I didn't catch it. Why is Blade a ninja? Like,
Yeah.
why is he versed in martial arts? Why does he have a samurai sword?
He
Also, at the end of the movie, where did Stephen Dorff's samurai sword come up from? Like, out of nowhere.
Yeah. There's
Like,
also a
like
scene and it's
the
conceivable that
end
maybe I
scene.
missed it and you can just fill in the gaps for
Yeah.
me because I was looking at Google and doing other things while I was like, wait, I gotta look this up. But he's got like almost like a shrine Blade
Yes.
in his home where he's got like a flower and then he destroys it in this like epic I'm angry scene. But I was just like,
I
wait, like
thought that something
why
else was gonna
though? Like,
happen.
yeah, was there like a scene that was just like cut out? Like
I
why
think
is it
so. He
why
has
where
this
did the
flower
shrine
and we
come
see
from?
it. It's a focal point several times in the movie.
Yeah.
And then at the end when he's like, I'm gonna go save the doctor and stop Frost from okay, so Frost, the plot of the movie is Blade is a vampire hunter
Yep.
with um Chris, I can't remember his character's name, Christopherson.
Yeah,
So
me neither.
they hunt vampires and they go all over the world tracking nests and dispatching them.
Yep.
They've been tracking Frost for a while, and he's very close to getting rid of him.
Mm-hmm. And Frost is trying to take over from the like old
Yes.
OG council of pureblood vampires.
He wants to kill them all and take over, and the way he's going to do that is there's this ancient prophecy that says there is this one vampire that is stronger than the rest, and I can't remember what the point was. He's just the strongest vampire ever.
Mm-hmm.
And he would
is
make
blood right because that needs to happen.
Yeah, of course.
Of course.
They're vampires.
Yeah.
And it would make them all like vampire gods.
Yeah.
Okay? So One of the things I find wild is that all of these like old vampires, these vampires who've been around since the dawning of time, that
Yep.
make up this sort of committee or syndicate or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, it's just a myth. I'm like, but you were around when this guy probably existed. How could you think it's not real? And then at the end, they find this tomb where they're going to do the blood rite, because of course it's going to be in America somewhere, because America's been around for a hot second,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it really
So
feels like it should be in like Egypt. If we're gonna be
yeah,
like
like, or Romania or whatever,
Romania. Yeah,
whatever.
somewhere not America. Yeah, I agree with that.
But so he finds this tomb that none of them, and they make a point of saying this. None of you knew this even existed. I'm like, you like millennial old fucker should know that this existed. You were probably there when you built it. I'm like, I couldn't understand. I'm like, how did, and why were they so easy to capture and kill throughout the whole movie? Like,
Yeah,
if you're
they
supposed
really
to be the
were.
oldest, truest, like legacy vampires, like what? Like, what? What's happening?
Oh, all right. Well, we need to talk about this before we forget. So, this
Yes.
movie has an iconic 90s movie quote that makes absolutely no sense. So
Sent me
I'm
reeling.
going to read a quote and we will drop this in the show notes after the show. But
Yes.
so the quote is, "Some motherfuckers are always trying to skate uphill." All right. And the description says, "Before landing the killing blow on Deacon Frost, Blade grimly laments," and then the quote, "Depending on who you ask, this line is either badass or completely confusing." As it turns out, these were the exact words that Snipes used to describe Frost during the brainstorming sessions. According to the movie's DVD commentary, the director and the writer loved the line so much that they just incorporated it into the final script, making it one of the strangest and most unforgettable action movie quotes to come out of the 90s. So, my question for you, live studio audience, replay audience,
Yeah.
and audience who are listening later, do you remember this quote? And if so, were
No.
you like, yay, badass, or what?
What?
Because I did not remember this quote at all. Granted, I don't
No.
remember most of this movie, but and even when I like watched this movie
It
again a
makes
couple
no
days
sense.
ago, like I was like, what? I backed it.
But so this quote is at the end of the movie.
It's at the end
Stephen
of the
Dorff
movie.
has so Frost has done the blood rite. He's killed all of the legacy vampires. Blade is he's barely resurrected because they needed to use his blood to do
To
the
do the
blood
blood
rite,
right, yeah.
and then he drains the doctor, who then ends up almost dying. It was a
Yeah.
very awkward scene, but but then apparently she's still alive at the end of the movie and manages to also kill a
To
bunch of
basically
vampires.
save the day. She
But
basically saves the
she
day for
did
sure.
a million times.
Mhm.
But so when he's fighting Frost in this final scene, and he knows now that he can rejuvenate very quickly because he like cuts his head off, cuts his hand off, cuts him in half. He rejuvenates instantly. So he knows now what he needs to do to kill him, and then he delivers this line. And I'm
Mhm.
like, what was Frost supposed to get out of that? Is it just because his last name is Frost and that means what, like it has to do with cold? Is that why you mentioned skating?
Let's look at that.
I I'm like, are you the motherfucker that's trying to skate uphill because like you're fighting this guy who can't be killed,
Does
or is
anyone skate uphill? Ice doesn't like normally settle. Like you need a flat surface to have
well no
ice,
you
right? Like
like you literally can't skate
you
uphill.
can't skate up. That's not a thing, right? Are we
Anyways,
like
it
I
was very
just don't.
I was very confused. Oh yes,
Yeah.
and so the doctor, again, she's the one that saved the day, the whole movie,
Mhm.
because
Props to
um
the doctor. Good doctor.
yes,
Props to you,
Karen.
Karen.
So before Karen cures herself
Mhm.
of vampirism,
Way to go,
she
Karen.
the first thing she does is she makes a weapon.
Yeah.
She makes a biological weapon to explode vampires on
Yeah.
contact.
Which was hard to watch because the CGI was real bad. But it
It's,
was just like,
it's,
is that
I was
what
like,
would
what?
happen? I feel like it wouldn't. I feel like they would just die. Like, I don't think that they would puff all up and explode like a pimple.
Yeah,
Like, that feels a little much.
it looked like a really bad case of hives until they exploded. It was,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, sure. But yeah. Yeah. That one was pretty
yeah.
epic. And then the other one that was equally epic as far as just like terrible yet hilarious CGI was at the very end of the movie. so the Stephen Dorff's character, Frost, has captured all of the like council of OG vampires and has
Yeah.
placed them is part of this blood right in this like circle in this super old, definitely older than the 1700s crypt in America. Go with us. And
Yeah.
they're like all waiting
That
there,
none
and
of
then there's
these knew about, but yeah.
yeah, no one knew about. And then there's a moment where like the Blade's blood is like being siphoned out of his body and like through this crazy thing, and it all connects and starts to drip down on them, and it hits them each in the head. And then a few
Yeah.
minutes later, their skeletons come out of their bodies, but
Yeah, yeah,
with
yeah.
wings. And I was like, I'm on board with this. It's
Yeah, it was
crazy,
great.
but it's
I
just
mean,
crazy enough to make me be like, yeah, I'm in.
yeah.
Like, I'm
And
in.
it's funny that scene, I was like, are they killing Steven Dorff?
I know,
Like, it
yeah, I
looks
had a
like
moment.
Frost is gonna die here, but then he's like, haha, my eyes turn bloodshot red. Now I am a super vampire. But like,
Yeah.
it really looked like it was killing him.
Yeah. Maybe that was the moment that he turned into the blood tornado that we don't get to see, which I'm upset about. I really would like to see the blood tornado,
Yeah.
but apparently not.
So when in this, so when Wesley Snipes is breaking into this tomb, which is exactly what they want him to do because they want to get his blood, there's this one scene where he's fighting. So he fights these two people in the hallway. He sticks them with this biological weapon that Karen made, and they
They
explode.
explode. Yeah.
And then there's he's fighting this other guy, and they're doing a bunch of roundhouse kicks. And how did I write it in my notes? Hang on. I was like, oh, I love the little kicky pirouettes.
Oh yeah. Some
Because
serious
they're doing
choreography.
roundhouse kicks and spinning, so it looks like they're doing a pirouette and martial arts at
Mhm.
the same time. And it was just I I shouldn't have laughed so hard because I'm like, yes, they're showing off like wonderful martial arts choreography and skills and whatever, but it just made me giggle. I'm like, kicky pirouettes.
Kicky pirouettes for the
Oh, that was
win.
my favorite part of the movie.
You know what we haven't talked about yet, and I have feelings, is the fact
Yes.
that Blade's mother is in this, and it's
Oh,
creepy.
okay. So
Like,
the plot twist was that Blade's mother was a human attacked by a vampire.
well,
She was in
pregnant.
the process,
Yeah.
yes, and she was pregnant. And as she's actively turning into a vampire while being brought into the ER. They save the baby, and it's presumed she's dead. So Blade is seeking vengeance on all vampires and trying to rid the earth of vampires. That's his whole existence. We
Yep.
find out later in the movie that his mom is actually still alive because she ended up turning.
Yep.
And like the vampire DNA that made him a vampire is Frost.
Yeah.
So Frost is not his human father, but it's his vampire father.
And like that didn't bother me as much as the fact that like there were scenes where she was just real
Hitting on him?
sexualized and hitting on him, and I was
Right?
like, but this
How weird is that?
is just like
And
what
she explains
what?
it. She explains it. She's like, "Well, I'm not actually your mother anymore. Your mother was a human and she died. I'm a vampire."
Yeah, it was a weird choice.
No,
It's a weird
it was a
choice.
weird. Yeah, I was like,
And like it's not mentioned in any of the like reviews that I read or notes, and I'm just kind of like, but it didn't
I
no
thought
one
that was
else
creepy.
like yeah, maybe everyone else just blocked that out of their memory and they were like, we're good. We're not going to talk about that at
Like
all.
he thinks his mom's dead. He sees his mom for the first time in his life because he was like they saved him by C-section. He never saw her.
Yeah.
He's meeting his mom for the first time in his life, and she's coming on to him.
Yeah, it was bad.
So weird.
It
It's
was
so
bad.
weird. Though I do love Frost was like, well, this is one fucking happy family reunion.
There are some great lines. Again,
Not in context of the mom
no,
hitting on her kid, but like, you know, when they
when
tell
they all meet
Blade,
up.
like,
Yeah.
we're your parents, and Blade is like,
Yeah.
oh, I love how he has so Karen, the doctor, tells him like, oh, you really, you know, you really love your buddy, your partner, and like he's your family. And he's like, I have no emotions, and humans are just a detriment to themselves. And she's like, yeah, you love him. And then when he ends up getting killed, and you see like they have this sort of father son moment, and like Wesley Snipes has all his emotions.
Wesley Snipes has what we like to
Dramatic
call
music.
feelings. Yeah.
Yes, quote unquote feelings. Oh my
Mhm.
god. I thought that tickled me too, because I was like, yes, action heroes aren't supposed to have emotions. We know.
I will say, I kind of liked, and this is very counter to my
He
typical
did play it well,
personality.
though. He did
He
play
did
that
play it
part well.
well.
You could feel his feelings.
I did like the fact that this one, unlike a lot of the 90s action movies, has no real romance between the like lead woman and Blade.
No.
Like he's never at any point like kisses her, tries, but like he's got like his little sexy time with his mom, which again is weird.
Weird.
But there's no like moment at all. Like he has the most emotion with the death of his like colleague and father figure, and that's about it. Like,
Yeah. I love
which
Paul, one of our live listeners, viewers, is like, I think they were on edibles on set.
yeah,
Yes, Paul,
agreed.
we agree. Like, they, I feel like there was supposed to be a romance because he did save this human woman,
Yeah,
which he really didn't need to. He
no,
could have just killed her,
he
knowing that
kind
she
of
was
did though
bitten.
because she's a hematologist and he needed her help. But that's
Well,
fine.
yes,
Whatever.
but he didn't know that when he burst into the city morgue, like to
True.
go kill the other vampire. So that was just convenient. But like, I feel like it was supposed to happen, but because it's allegedly Wesley Snipes was not very interested in doing this movie, he just wanted the paycheck and was like barely there to film. Like, I
Yeah,
feel like they just had to cut a whole bunch just to get the
possible.
movie out. So it lost that moment, but
Yeah, it is
I mean,
absolutely
it
possible.
worked. It worked. It didn't
It
need a
does.
romance.
I will say, like,
Yeah.
as weird and terrible as this one was, like it worked. It worked from like it worked to start to finish. There was enough
Yeah.
suspension of belief, and certainly like at the time, like a lot of what this movie did was pretty novel and kind of cool and
Yeah.
created like a whole genre of what is now the Marvel universe, and and launched like also a series of pretty epic vampire movies as well. Like, I mean, I know vampire
Yep.
stories have been around as long as we've been storytelling, but I think that they're, it makes me think of like Underworld, and I mean there were like a
Yeah.
ton of vampire movies that came out in and around this time period that I'm sure
We
to
don't
some
mean
level
Twilight, like pre-Twilight. We mean like
pre-Twilight.
actual vampire
Eventually, it
movies.
got us all the way to Twilight. Thank goodness. Yeah, no.
Hey, I not as much the movies, but the books, the Twilight books were good
I
because
like
they
the
weren't
books. Yeah.
actually, but they weren't actually about vampires. Vampires were just a literary device to get
Yeah.
the plot across. Like they had, it was a young adult romance.
Yeah. So young
She
adult
just
romance.
happened to use vampires. She couldn't care less about vampires, which makes me giggle every time people are like, "It's so stupid. It's like an insult to vampire stories." It's like, well, it's not really a vampire story, so whatever.
I hate to break it to you, but all right. So here are some fun facts for you. I think we've covered a lot of them,
Yes.
but just in case. So we covered the origins of the ice skating uphill, which again is not a thing. We talked a little bit about the Marvel universe.
Hmm.
But if you are a member of the Marvel universe or you're a fan of the plethora of Marvel movies out there, you'll know
I
that
am.
Stan Lee was alive at the time of this movie being produced and yet was not in it, which is weird for Stan Lee. His role was actually his typical traditional cameo, which is so like
Yeah.
in every other movie that he's done. He
I
was in
feel
this
like
one and
Jon
his scene got
Favreau
cut
brought
out.
him into that. Yeah. Oh, he did do a cameo for
He did
this?
do a cameo for this and his scene got cut out. He apparently was supposed to be I'm looking through
For
here.
shame.
I know. He was supposed to be the cop who discovered Quinn's burned corpse at the very beginning during the rave scene that goes wrong, but his scene was cut. Weirdly
Whatever
enough,
editor did that is probably like
they should add it
nowadays
back
being like,
in.
I fucked up.
Yeah, right? Just add it back in. Come on now. Add that and
Yeah.
the blood tornado back
Oh,
in. Let us
Disney will
have
take care of it.
Yeah, Disney will take
Disney
care of
will
it.
take care of it.
Apparently also, and maybe this makes you feel all kinds of feelings, but Michael Jackson was supposed to actually be a vampire pimp in Blade 2, but he dropped out because of scheduling conflicts. So that would have been
Oh,
interesting. Not gonna
so
lie.
disappointed.
So we are gonna have to watch the rest of them because
Yes.
Blade 2 is apparently the cast's, like Wesley Snipes and a lot of the other actors, that was their favorite of the three. Wesley Snipes
Good.
hated Blade 3 and actually was caught up in
I
like a legal battle over it. Like he hated that movie. But
I
apparently
wonder
2 was good.
why. I feel like it's because Ryan Reynolds. That's okay. So for people who knew Ryan, okay, for the Canadians
For the
who knew
Canadians out
Ryan
there.
Reynolds before he got buff, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is the movie where he got buff, and
Yeah.
then the whole world is like, "Who is that hot man?"
Yeah.
Okay, and I feel like it was it. Wesley Snipes, I feel like took it as competition for being like the buffest, like the
Yeah.
buff guy on, like it. I feel like it was hubris.
It
So
might have been.
not so much the movie. I feel like I feel, and I can't really remember two or like I haven't seen them in a very long time, but I feel like
Yeah.
Trinity was my favorite of the three movies.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
I
obviously a
mean, I
big
like
Ryan
the
Reynolds
first
fan, so
one because it was really
yeah.
it set this whole thing up, this kind of
Mm-hmm.
action, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, he's great. And
curious.
apparently, word on the street is that Ryan Reynolds took a lot of what he brought to that character from the third movie
Yeah.
into other characters like Deadpool. So I think again, without this series of movies, there wouldn't be a lot of the other characters that you know and love.
Yeah, Ryan
Other
Reynolds very much. That's his shtick is like improving lines
yeah, and
and
comedic
cracking
brilliance. Yeah,
jokes.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
he was like that way before because he was on
Hmm.
sitcoms and stuff like way
Hmm.
back
Oh
before
yeah.
he was an action star. I'm like,
Um,
he's always done this. It's just now he works out more.
yeah. I'm gonna
Uh,
butcher the pronunciation of this name, so live studio audience, you can laugh at me and send me corrections. But Guillermo del Toro, who is like a very famous director
Nailed it.
these days. Nice, thank you. Practicing it while we were talking. No, he directed this movie, or he was one of the directors on this movie, which again I
What?
find yeah,
But there was no hand eyes.
I know.
You
So
know his
it's
Pan's Labyrinth thing that he won't let go
yeah.
of, and it puts in everything, including The Hobbit, which I was like, really?
Yeah, so interesting. He was also involved
Oh,
in
cool. Well,
like
he's a
the
good director.
series in general, but yeah.
So I have some.
He also worked on Hellboy too. So speaking of
Yeah.
ones that were
Oh, that's
darker.
true.
So
Huh.
let me just scroll through and see if there's anything else. But I think those were
I
the
have
the
questions.
oh good.
So
Oh,
this movie
questions.
has left me with questions.
All right, go for
One,
it.
who bankrolls Blade? Where
That
do they
is
get
a
money? Like, who bankroll? Where does the money come from? Because, like, at the end of the movie, especially, it's like he turns to the doctor. He's like, "All right, like, time to kick vampire ass all over the world," and it shows him up like in Russia. Okay, and who bankrolls this?
yeah.
Like, is it Tony Stark? Like,
It's true.
it's definitely not the
It's
U.S.
true.
government. The MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has very well established that the U.S. government does not consider their superheroes federal employees, so they don't get a salary, which is
Yeah.
super depressing.
Just-
Interesting factoid, and I'm going way off topic here, but there is a Canadian Marvel team, like the Avengers, called Alpha Flight, and they are federal employees. So they have, benefits and
Canada
retirement
supports its
plans.
superheroes. I love here. So welcome to the stream, late Doc. Doc is hanging out in the live studio audience. If you're listening or watching on replay, you could have been here in the live studio audience, contributing and hanging out with Paul and Kirby's 100 and Luis, and and you missed it. But Doc says that he is a bona fide day walker. Yeah. So
Nice.
yeah, questions and thoughts, folks. We're nearing the end here, so let us know. Have you seen this? Paul says he just finished watching it up again last night. If you've seen it, like Doc I know has and Paul has,
Yeah.
what would you rate it? What would you rate this one? Throw some potatoes in there
And
and let us know.
how do you? So Katie and I were talking about this before we logged on. We're rating movies just so our listeners know. We're rating on an emotional scale. Like,
Yeah.
it's what goes into it
We're
is like
putting a
how much
lot of thought
I
into it.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's a negotiation
is
too,
it
because
good? Is it brilliant? Is it,
exactly. Did it give
does
us
it stand the
feels?
test of
Yeah.
time? Is it? And we were thinking that because Katie was like, "Man, the CGI in this was bad." I'm like, "It was actually pretty good for the time. Like,
It's
this
pretty
was a
good for the
very
time.
well received movie."
Yep.
So, like, you have to, when you watch it, you have to be like, put it in historical context. And
Yep.
so, should that add potatoes, take away potatoes? How do you guys use your potatoes? We want to
Grab your
know.
potatoes and lay them out. How many do you?
My potatoes are emotional.
Yeah.
That's it.
Natalie
How
only has
much
emotional
joy
potatoes.
did this spark? That's
How
it.
much joy did this spark? What even is the point of potatoes if they don't spark joy? Is really the
Exactly.
is really the question for all of it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm
I'm
interested to
so
hear.
surprised also, like, how did those old vampires die so easily?
Yeah, that was disappointing. Yeah, so I would say like the not even questions I
What?
had, but just like moments of weird was like
Paul
the,
likes
I
mashed potatoes.
Paul likes
I
mashed
love that,
potatoes.
Paul. Love it.
Solid choice. Yeah, there was like a lot of question. I weirdly I didn't have any questions about the money. I just was like on board with that. I'm like, well, he's wealthy, obviously, or he has a wealthy benefactor, or his sidekick is really well. I don't know. I never really thought about it, but
No,
I did notice the lack of love story, which felt like there was clearly something happening or missing or cut out. I did notice the weird
the ninja
ninja
skills.
skills and like the altar, and I wanted to know like where was that
Yeah.
backstory. And yeah, and I totally agree about the council. I was like, these guys have been around for
Mm.
forever. They know that Deacon is like a complete upstart who's coming at them, and they didn't seem to fight back at all.
Yeah.
Like, what? Why not? Why didn't they fight back? Doc says that Blade is one of
Yes.
his top 10 because of the the Josh Wink opening scene music.
Yes.
Epic opening scene. Like when we were rewatching this one, both Dane and I and Nat agreed here. It's like
Yeah.
you watch it and it's a whole experience. It's a vibe. It takes you
Good.
back. You have feelings. You know what's coming. Like you're like there are vampires in this rave. It's definitely a
I love
whole
there
vibe.
was, and I don't know if it was just my ears playing tricks on me, but it sounded like there was a bit of a Prodigy Firestarter
Oh yeah.
like remix
Yeah.
happening in the fight scene at the beginning.
Mhm.
Which I was like, yeah, that was I loved electronica back in the day.
Yeah.
It was so good. In
Oh,
all the
Doc says,
movies.
yeah, so valid point. So in all the movies, vampires are always wealthy because they're so old, so they've had time to
Yeah,
earn
but
and
Blade
save a
isn't.
bunch.
He ages like a human.
Bad Lady is just like a human. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I mean, yes, the other guys, I can see why they're rich.
I guess Chris Christopherson's character, whose name we can't remember,
We'll look it up.
he could have brought antiquities. Antiquities are valuable, so they could sell old stuff. Doc's like, yeah, they got this. They're entrepreneurial. Vampires are entrepreneurial, and they have
Well,
solid
yeah. I
stuff.
mean, like they said, they kind of
Yeah.
they sort of ruled the politicians. They rule government. They rule police. Like, yeah, they make money.
Yeah.
Whistler. The character's name is Whistler.
Whistler. I was like thinking about like W names. I was like Whitman, Winnigan. Just, like, not at all close to what the actual name was. Whistler.
Oh,
Yeah, he was awesome. There's something about like an old timey country vibe guy with guns that you're just like, yeah, I gotcha. I feel you. I feel you, old person, and your belief system. I like you.
I do. Another scene that made me kind of I'm watching it and it's super emotional when Whistler's dying and Blade
Oh.
is there and he's not really comforting him. Whistler has something to say and he's listening, so that's important. But Blade has this tiny little square of gauze that he takes and he's just gingerly
Yes,
patting.
it's the tiniest it is. It's like it is
And it's like
literally
he
the
doesn't
size of a
change the gauze.
thumbnail. No,
The gauze doesn't turn red and
no.
Whistler is covered in blood.
You can't even see the gods. It's so small. Like
And he's
it's
just gingerly
yeah.
patting one spot, not where there's a wound. Like, I
Yeah.
was like, why bother?
I
Like,
feel like
why not just be like, I'm dying and I have to tell you something, and then be like, yes, tell me what you have to say. What was the little pat, pat, pat?
I feel like the makeup
Oh, I
person
just
was
love.
like, "Don't take the makeup off of him. It's so expensive and hard to put on." And so he's
I
like,
don't
"Let
know.
me do this scene and just look like I care, but don't actually remove the makeup."
I
Yeah,
feel
it
like
was
that's where Wesley Snipes was like,
giving
yeah,
out.
let's just wrap this up because I have
Yeah.
other places to be. I don't know. Did you mention it during the episode that
No,
Wesley
so
Snipes?
there were a couple of articles that basically said
Yeah.
that like Wesley Snipes, to his credit, like
Yes.
when he received this script and signed on to this, like there were no superhero movies. Like superhero movies were like not really a thing. Like kind of, but not really. So it was a risk for him to take this role, and I'm sure to some level he was just like, "Oh, this will be fun to get to like beat up people and just be like a big badass guy." But he supposedly, like, there were whole moments of filming this movie where he clearly was just like, well, it's Friday night, like, so let's wrap this up. Or like, hey, maybe we don't need to work on Mondays. Like, can we just not do this right now?
Let's
Like,
just cut those scenes
let's just
because
cut those scenes.
whatever.
He definitely was phoning it in a little bit, or allegedly was not super into working the long
I'm
hard
really
hours for
happy
this
he
one.
did it.
I'm happy
I'm
he
really
did it,
happy he
and
did
I
it.
think
He did so good at it. Like
he pulled it off.
nobody could have done this other than him. Yeah.
He is, I mean, the character is so much of a presence, but he brings so much of a presence to this character.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled that he did it. And
Yeah.
I would love to know if you know this, people listening or watching, email us, the vhspod@gmail.com, and tell me. I don't know how to pronounce the doctor's name, and I was gonna look that at, like, her real name, Karen's real name. I was gonna look this up beforehand, but it's like real complicated, and I don't want to totally destroy her name and culture.
She was very
But
old.
she was incredible. So if anyone knows how to pronounce her name, I'll have to learn it for next time, and we can do like I will do an apology to her at the beginning of the next episode.
She was like Wesley Snipes had a six-pack, but so did she.
Yeah, she was great.
I was like, wow, like she fit in her little crop top, like.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, with that basically wraps it. And thank you to everyone, because I know we promised everyone we would do True Lies this episode, but hang in there with us. We are going to do True Lies next week. We're going to do it a day early on Wednesday just to throw you off in the live studio audience, but also just because we're doing a whole bunch of scheduling stuff. But normally we are live Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. And if you don't catch us live, you can always catch the replay on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you like to listen to podcasts. We are available on all the different places. But we're going to try to do a few more like fun things for live studio audience people. I noticed no one has dropped in how many potatoes yet. Where are the potato emojis, friends? Because we're swinging over to potatoes. But yeah, you can, more interactivity for people hanging out in the live studio audience. How many potatoes, Paul would like to know?
Paul, Doc, Luis, like, how many potatoes do you think? How many potatoes would you give this movie?
How many potatoes would you all give this movie? While you are throwing that into the comments, yeah, we will swing on over. We were at 3. We were at 3. We were at 4, and Natalie talked me down to 3. So we were like somewhere between 3 and 4. I feel like we need a half potato, but cutting Christian Tater's head in half is just sacrilege. So we're between.
Doc
Boucher.
mentioned...
En Boucher. All right. Am I doing it right, Doc? En Boucher. I like it. Nice job. Nice job. Well, you are a badass, En Boucher. Why are you not in more movies now? Because
I know. Can we... Doc gives it all the potatoes.
Doc, we found one of your favorites.
Love it. We do love the movie. I think because I talked it down to 3 potatoes instead of 4 because I just think some of it was not actually good, even though I really, really liked it.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking 3 or 4. Yeah, okay. And Doc, I think we need a new segment for the show where so maybe we'll have to force you all to send in video clips or give us some rationale. But I'm just so fascinated, and I don't actually think I can answer this question myself, but like what are everyone's favorite movies, and what like makes a favorite movie? Like, how do you... I can't answer the question. I don't have like one favorite movie. I could probably do a list of like 10, but even then I move the rating system depending on mood.
I could give you like top 3.
You could give top 3? All right, right now in this moment, 9:53 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, June 1st.
I will give you my number 1.
What's your number 1?
Okay, favorite movie is To Have and Have Not. To Have or Have Not, sorry.
To Have or Have Not.
Bogey and Bacall's first movie. It was like a pre-Casablanca.
Nice choice.
Also done by Hemingway, and also the script was fixed by Faulkner. Anyways, it's fantastic. It has some of the best dialogue, the most chemistry. Yeah, that's my favorite movie of all time.
I really I struggle. I like if you ask me right this second, I would probably say Better Off Dead.
That's a good one.
Is always in my like top 5, but right now I'm feeling that one's my top. But then Empire Records, Romeo and Juliet are up there. Like I think about like movies I've fully memorized versus like ones that like I can't remember the scenes for, movies I've watched
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of times versus ones I've only
Yeah.
seen once or twice but loved. Like which ones I spent money on and actually bought. Like I really struggle with it. I think it changes for like that thing you do is on my list. Yeah, Doc says that Blade gets GOAT status for starting the MCU. It was the
Yes,
first
it
successful
does.
Marvel film. It deserves all right, you know what? You're right. It deserves a potato for that. Let's well, here you go, Doc. Look at this. With the wonder of Ecam, we have added back a potato. 4 potatoes. 1 is for Doc,
It's
2
true.
for Natalie, and 2 for me, but still a total of 4 because Katie math.
Yeah, because maths. Yeah. No, I love that this is what started the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's iconic.
It's
I love
iconic.
it. So apparently Disney is bringing it in,
Yep.
possibly in the form of a TV show.
Yep.
Stephen Dorff is very upset about it. He thinks that Marvel movies are not real movies.
Ooh,
Much
yeah.
like Tarantino has come out saying that they're not real actors and they're not real movies. I'm
Eh,
like, okay,
I mean, it's a side.
you just be salty that they made more money than you. Okay,
Mhm.
that's fine.
Yep, some salty feels.
Yeah. Yes, and Howard the Duck was technically the first movie. We did mention that. Also,
Yeah.
Howard the Duck was technically an Endgame, that final Thanos battle scene. There are screen grabs of that. You can find that on the internet. Love Howard the
Yeah.
Duck.
Yeah. That one should be on the list. And then Dick Tracy. There's a lot on the list. We'll share the list so that you can see
Yes,
it and fully appreciate how long this podcast is going to go on for. Feel free
yes,
to throw some ideas our way. We are paying attention to your ideas, even though we don't move as quickly as you think. And we do want to have guests on. So if you have like a favorite movie that you want to talk through, or Doc, if you want to come back, you can always join us in another one. But yeah, come on and hang out with us. We still definitely we're working our way now through some action flicks, and then we have to get back to Clueless and some Jane Austen
yeah.
movie adaptations, so that we can force Mel to come on the show with us. But yeah, I'm fascinated with like the movies that people love and why. My husband Dane's favorite movie is Gattaca, so we feel like we
It's
should
on the
do that one.
list.
That's on the list. Yeah,
I
and
also want to
he's
do some really
dedicated to that
bad,
one. Yeah,
like, I
bad.
think we should definitely do The Room. We
The
should
Room.
definitely
Yeah.
do Rock and Roll, Streets of Fire, Rock and Roll Fable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, there's a lot. And then, I
Yeah.
mean, there's also so many that I haven't even put on the list. The list, so when I started making the list, I was just like, whatever movie came to mind, and then something about that movie would trigger the thought of another movie. So
Mm-hmm.
it's in chronological order of my thought process.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not in an order of how we're going to do movies.
It's true. It's true. We'll share that haphazard list, though. I think we'll have to find a good way to make it
Crazy.
shareable
I
and
love it.
share. Oh my goodness. Well, as
Yes.
usual, you've wasted another perfectly good hour listening to us. You could have been doing other things like starting a good movie, but you didn't. So thank you for hanging out with us tonight. And if you're catching this on replay or if you're a part of our listening audience, thank you so much. You can show us your love by liking and sharing and leaving a review. We'd really appreciate it. And if you want to hang out in our live studio audience, a little bit of a moving target just to keep things real. But for the most part, we're here Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. And we've had 5 people watching with us throughout this entire time.
That's
So,
awesome.
that's
Thanks, guys. We love it.
we're building our live studio audience, and we are happy to take requests, predominantly from live. Yeah, Doc is saying that one's been on my list for a really long time, but
Rocky Horror Picture Show, but
Rocky Horror
we'll save
Picture
that for a
Show.
seasonal block.
George
We're
says the
saving that one.
abominable Dr. Phoebes. I don't know that one. Oh, Nat, do you know that one? We may have to do that one.
Ooh.
Makes me
I
chuckle that
might
you
have
guys
that
just
on DVD.
Oh, George, good suggestion. Thanks for watching and hanging out in our live studio audience.
And also, Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, which
Mm-hmm.
also
Gleaming the Cube. Yeah, there's some good
but
suggestions in here. Mr.
Wesley Snipes is
Ripley.
in that. So
Doc, I feel like we might just have to force you to be like we like go live over to Doc for
yeah.
Doc's feelings, and then you can give like a 3-second like I loved it or I hated it. It could just be ridiculous. Yeah, we could just force you to do some fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you for listening, and we will catch you Wednesday if you're part of the live audience.
Yep.
Coming up Wednesday for True Lies, which I can't remember if I've seen or not, so it could be an adventure. And then the following Thursday we'll be back, and we'll we'll pick our next movie after True Lies. But hopefully we have our guest on, Chris. Hopefully he's going to join. But if not, we will rock it.
We will
in
do
his
it
honor.
anyways. Yes.
Well, thanks for hanging out, Nat, and we will see everyone next time. Bye, everyone.